Jon Vest is the Extension Agent for Floyd County with the Virginia Cooperative Extension. His expertise helps novice and experienced farmers produce quality livestock and crops throughout our region. Jon has offered to share his experiences with our audience and provide them with the knowledge to keep agriculture strong. This is the Ag Show with Jon Vest.
We'd like to welcome our outside guests that will be tuning in for this episode of the Ag Show, brought to you by Citizens Telephone Cooperative and Virginia Cooperative Extension. I'm Jon Vest, and this will be our segment on soils.
This episode of the Ag Show and the Seed to Shelf series is brought to you by We Insure Retirement. If you are retired or are planning to retire, visit WeInsureRetirement.com to keep the gold in your golden years.
This is just poinsettias here. Poinsettias are fairly resilient greenhouse plants, thick stems, heavy, it's a pretty resilient plant in itself. But when I'm first sticking poinsettias in my pots in the ground, I've gotten the plugs in. I've prayed that they have arrived without being frozen on the truck. Same could apply for any of my small vegetable seedlings, okay? Based on the fertilizer that has been used, or the fertilizer that has been applied down here, there's a certain amount of salt content, or EC, electroconductivity within the soil itself, that is going to prevent a young plant from being able to survive the fertilizer that's in the soil. Too much of a good thing can be a bad, right? It's not up in here till 3.5 weeks, moving into 6 to 9 to 12. Can I then, in active growth, and this is applicable to all vegetable plants or all of our young plants, that's when I can start adjusting my fertilizer and moving it up, because now that plant is getting larger, getting more mature. Yes, in its teen years, it's got one leg. By the time it's mature, it's got 2 legs, wanting to really feed them both. So we need to be conscientious of those situations that arrive. Let's talk about a pH situation. Right off the bat, I've said plants all have their window of desired pH. If I was growing in the greenhouse right now, the way I test for my pH of these soils here is with a unit. It's very, this is an EC meter and pH meter and stuff here. This actual tool would be used. I have to keep it moist and keep it dipped in a buffer solution, but then I will pour distilled water through whatever plant container they've chose to plant their greenhouse plants in, your vegetable plants before they've been sold to you, and we'll pour distilled water through that, and we'll capture it in the container below. And I'll pour it back up through there, and I'll capture it again. And on the third time through, I stick that probe in the water. And if the EC in that water is not below a 3, I can pretty much assure myself that the greenhouse is using so much fertilizer. That's the reason they have that marginal leaf burn all the way around their brand new vegetable plants, okay? And yes, that's a tolerable level once we get up to week 3. And certainly it's not enough time we get up to week 6. But those are the things that, when I'm talking about the specifics of us starting seeds at home or starting our plants at home, that we need to pay attention to. If I go buy a bag that is charged with a fertilizer, it has been designed to carry those potted larger materials, transplantable size material on for the next 6 months, where they're getting planted out in the lawn and the landscape. I can choose, this is supposed to be a lawn soil. What does it say in there? Plus starter fertilizer. Suddenly, instead of going from a fertilizer content that I bet if I read on here, it would say something relatively small on this bag. something, it's not uncommon to have like a 625 or something like that on a small charged bag, or even a 232. 232. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potash, 232. That's fine on small stuff. As I move to a lawn fertilizer and I start looking at what a starter fertilizer has been added, starter fertilizers can range all the way up to a 17% nitrogen. If I chose to go to the garden shed and grab the lawn bag of lawn soil and then try to plant my seedlings in it, what have I just done? Particularly with this bag, I've probably burned them up, particularly as young seedlings. Not that it couldn't be used several weeks later to pot up too, but right now it's too highly charged. Here's Miracle Grow garden soil, all-purpose garden soil. Feeds up to 3 months. I love it. They don't even tell me the fertilizer's there. They're telling me that it feeds up to 3 months. Well, yes, it's got a long, slow release fertilizer in the bag. We can spread it out here and pick out the fertilizer that is in that bag. Actually, that one busted right at my hand. It's nice and white and powdery right there. Grab my container here. When you are choosing your products, I am not cheap, I'm frugal. I like to use my garden soil that I already have. I like to use the mulched beds around the house. I like to use the material from down at the barn. Now, that's all parent soil, just like what we have here. So I need it to be I need to have it relatively good in tilth or be able, that type of situation. If I choose to grow or I'm going to make a switch, I need to realize that I'm switching from my regular soil to soil-less mixes, okay? These mixes, the advantages to them are no longer am I dealing with a parent soil that may have a root rot organism in it or an insect egg mass in it or whatever that I've moved it from. Now I am working from basically clean materials that in turn are going to provide me an extended period of time where I shouldn't have to experience a root rot or I shouldn't have to experience an insect outbreak, at least from the soil, based on choosing these products here. I still have to pay attention to the, the materials that are in. For instance, for any of my seedling material, I would strongly suggest a very fine soilless media. If we were to travel down to Delaney's greenhouses here in Floyd and ask the experts, Sarah would be right there and she'd tell us everything you ever want to know about how this particular soilless mix performs so much better than the one right beside it on the trailer, but she uses it for a different particular crop. The fact of the matter is there are those potting mixes that work very well for seeding starting, and those are your finest, and I guess they don't have a lot of bark, they don't have a lot of larger material in them to work with. They might have an additional amount of peat to help retain moisture. They're also going to have two things. They're going to have vermiculite and they're going to have perlite, okay? Everybody, you recognize perlite, don't you? Does everybody kind of remember what perlite is in your soil media? It's all our white balls in here. Perlite is basically a volcanic glass, or when obsidian is heated and it expands out, it creates this white material. It's long-lived. If I wanted to use it in the garden to create airspace in my garden, I absolutely could. And it's going to last the elements out there just as easily as they do that last the elements in the greenhouse. And it certainly allows for improved drainage, and it adds for added airspace. Does it do anything for moisture? Not really. It helps bind some moisture around the particle itself. But if I'm looking for soils that I need to have an added moisture content for, which most of my garden seeds are, I might consider vermiculite instead. Now, I don't have any vermiculite up here to show you. As I run my hand through, I didn't see any that I can readily pick out in this particular soil. But vermiculite is another wonderful soil amendment. Keep in mind, none of these, once again, I'm not throwing huge swings at things. I'm talking about something that we would amend maybe 25% to your existing soil to improve its situation. The neat thing about vermiculite is it provides for also the improved aeration, but it also improves your soil watering or your soil water holding capacity. So the nice thing about seedlings, I could actually take a material like this and I could fill in my seed trays, and I could plant my seeds across the top, or I could poke the ones that need to be in a little deeper, I could poke them down. But then I could take a bag of vermiculite and I could grab that up, 2 handfuls out of that, and go right over top. And that's all the covering that's necessary for many of those young seeds that don't tolerate a heavy soil laying on top of them, to really have a nice water absorptive area around them, to make sure that when that root shoots out, that number one, there's no salt there, but it's going to contact into that perlite or into that light soil media and take off in the generation of my new plant. Is vermiculite useful in the garden? It can be. Keep in mind, we start to get out of our scale of what is truly productive. In the garden situation, I would look at including other organic matter and other material, compost, to really build my water holding capacity, as opposed to getting out here and using small material like vermiculite or perlite. These are designed for that seedling table or those seedling trays or immediate small pots that we get started in, and where I would add 25% of that to my original soil, mix it all up nice in my soil pot, and be prepared to grow my seeds. Say I had a seed that I didn't want to have a lot of moisture. Maybe I wanted to start seedling, maybe I wanted to start succulents, cacti, and various things like that. There's where we go back to the perlite, the white material. It's not holding its water, it's just creating airspace and drainage, which is exactly what succulents prefer. Okay? So once again, little minimal things that we can certainly improve our seedling on the table situation to really take off and grow from, without taking huge swings at our soil as a whole. For those of us that like or want to see an improvement in our turf or in our landscape, maybe our grass isn't performing well, there is an absolute advantage to tilling in or starting to incorporate or top dress your yard with compost. By year 3, you will immediately see by year 3 the huge improvement over your grass production by adding compost to your regular turf areas. That's all I'm going to say on that, because I'm supposed to be talking about seeds. One of those famous charts that we know it's in the book, or we know it's on the internet somewhere, we can't ever seem to put our finger on it when we go to look for it. When I talk about pH making soil nutrients available to crops, this is why. Each one of these, nitrogen, phosphorus, potash, calcium and magnesium, sulfur, boron, copper, zinc, molybdenum, iron, and then we start to get into our microorganisms. All of those do better in their desired pH of soil, or in their window of soil. So here is why when I say I want a garden soil that ranges from a 5.8 up here to no more than a 7, is because I had the fattest band of soil nutrient available to me, even the iron, until I get down here to aluminum, which I don't necessarily want anyway, but also my micronutrients and things. I have the fattest band available to me in that window of any other level of pH I can have. As my pH goes up or starts to get too basic, boron starts to drop, copper starts to drop, iron starts to drop. I start to get yellowing. The boron is important for my abscission layer on my fruit and vegetables themselves. It creates that particular layer that when if it fails to form, provides the ability for that fruit to cling onto my plant. So if that layer fails from a lack of boron, my fruit drops prematurely. And I'm saying, why is my fruit hitting the ground in the garden? And my soil test, hopefully, has come back and said, I've got a lack of boron. Or is it because my pH had slipped up so high that the boron that's there, which the soil test is going to tell us the correct amount or the volume that's there. At that point, we know it's there. My pH just needs to be stepped down to here. And now I've fixed another problem with why I cannot get my fruit or my vegetables to cling to the vine. This is the one we commonly see, and I don't like it because they put the pH up here on the very top, very small. But we talked about blueberries. Why? Here's a 5.5 right here. And as we look down through here, those nutrients most available to the blueberries are going to be the iron, they're going to be the boron and the copper. Those things that really benefit acid-loving plants. This is why azaleas and rhododendrons do better in a low pH soil. As we move up from that 5.5, let's jump on up here to garden soil. Once again, right about here. For lack of doing that, you can see I have an availability of nutrients off the board, off the chart, before I go too far in the wrong direction. When it comes to targeting pH of soil, I've said that we can use lime and we can use wood ash and those materials. We can use gypsum to move pH up in scale and hopefully closer to those nutrients that their plant is looking for. In those situations where I don't necessarily want to move pH, but I need more calcium, I'll start substituting gypsum in place of lime. But that's another trick we do in garden situations. But I wanted to put this up here because there's on that occasion, that Centennial Farm, where I have to take or bring pH back down. Lots of times it is for blueberries, and I try to bring the pH down first before that first blueberry plant is ever planted in its grow zone. And this is what we're looking at if I use elemental sulfur to start to bring pH or adjust pH back down in soil. And the reason I like this chart here, this is out of the University of West Virginia. Our buddies up one state, I had to jump. I had to outrun the clouds the other day to see my, the eclipse. Yes. Finally, just the northern part of Lewisburg, I ran out into some sky. We could see the eclipse. Cool thing about sulfur is a little dab will do you in many cases, but we always have to think about, once again, the soils that we're dealing with. Clay soils hold and don't tolerate a lot of change very easily. So it requires more material, usually, to get clay soils to adjust. If we get into a nice loam soil, in many cases, that's the nice place to be, where we certainly want to be. We have a balance of organic material. We have a balance of microorganisms. We have a balance of nutrients. That's a wonderful soil to be in. Sand. There's where it will take, it's either being depleted faster than I can put it back, or I need very little to adjust things back. But for instance here, let's say I had a pH of 5.0. And yes, that's low. I'm not talking about for regular garden soil. Let's say I had a pH of 6.5. Keep that in the back of your mind. But for right now, it's 5.0, and I want to reduce that. Here's my pH here. Here's my garden soil, 6.5. Say I'm starting to get a little too sweet. I got up here to a 7. If I want to reduce that down a half point to a 6.5, where the bulk of my nutrients are available again, then I could add to my clay garden soil 3.7 pounds of elemental sulfur down a 100-foot row or a 100-foot square, whatever it may be, to adjust my pH down a half a point. Okay? So I can go in both directions. The interesting thing about sulfur is it's usually a lot faster than the lime. So I can go backwards in a hurry, where it takes a long time to move pH up the scale. Now I put in 2 slides right here because that one is for the elemental sulfur per 100 square feet. But this next one may be more helpful to, to all of you. Sometimes I don't need to achieve huge swings. Like I said, maybe I don't want to go that elemental sulfur and make with that one element the change. Maybe, just maybe, I could buy a sulfur-based fertilizer, aluminum sulfate, ammonium sulfate, one of these others. And with an ammonium sulfate fertilizer, because it's got an acidic sulfur base to it, I then, on that 7.0, for my clay, I could be fertilizing over the course of the year. If that garden saw as little as 10 pounds of ammonium sulfate fertilizer, I would bring it down and never have to adjust with my elemental sulfur. I guess what I'm trying to get across to everybody in the room is that if we can all start with a baseline, with a soils test, understand that there is definitely a window for whatever crop we're trying to grow. And I want to put a smack dab in that window in the center of that to best affect those crop growing conditions. pH comes first. If we're outside that window and I throw fertilizer at that crop, it may still not ever become available to the crop. It's outside its pH availability or its ability for the plant material to adjust and take it up. So it will sit there in the ground or be lost to volatilization or whatever else may be, or leaching and things of that nature. Throwing money at fertilizer ahead of getting your pH correct is throwing money away. And if I can instill in everybody that by all means getting your pH correct first, you're going a long way in saving yourself money. I'm going to close with one last piece of discussion. When it comes to my microorganisms, and I don't care whether you're organic, I don't care whether you're conventional, the fact of the matter is, if I want to develop nice plant growing conditions that are going to create those root systems that have the ability to grow deep, in search of water, supportive of that plant top up top, get it through drought conditions of either hot and dry or even through the winter. Those microorganisms in the soil go a long way in creating the breakdown of all those nutrients and that availability. Microorganisms have their own pH level, okay? Once again, you step out of what would be an ideal garden soil situation and you are moving out of what is the desirable level for the bulk of our beneficial microorganisms. So, remember when I said a little too much of a good thing is a bad thing? Say I wanted to come in and I have a wonderful garden soil. Been there, the microorganisms, the mycorrhizae and everything in the soil has been built up over years and I'm doing wonderfully. And my pH is off though, or my pH has kind of gotten out of whack. And I throw something, say I decide to use a lime for whatever reason. I didn't go get the soil sample first. I didn't try to make a decision about where I was at. But I threw a big swing at things. That 2 ton to the acre amount. Or say I just use pelletized lime, which normally for every 5,000 feet we use about 3.5 bags to get up at a point. say I went crazy and I said, oh, the garden needed eight bags, 12 bags. I'm going to get us back real quick. It's not how it works. I didn't speed the process by getting more lime down. All I did was create a layer in my soil that now starts to work against my microorganisms. So if I can just instill in everybody, both viewers and folks here this evening, the fact that take small swings at your soil. Know, number one, from a soil test, what your baseline is at. And that will do more to help us steer educated decisions on what may be going either wrong with a particular crop, or maybe just help us in the benefit of growing things outright like what we've discussed. But very rarely in the plant diseases or the insects and things that I see, are they ever there initially. They are there largely to the runt pig, or to when I have plant material that's going in the wrong direction or succumb to a condition that I could have avoided, I am that problem. Or if I've broken down that soil to the point through tilling year after year after year after year to where I've now got that hard pan, or the roots grow down. Hey, John, my stuff comes out of the greenhouse. It goes out there. For the next 6 weeks, it's going gangbusters, and all of a sudden it sits there and stands. What's going on? It just hits your hard pan. And it's, in certain situations, it could be the same thing in a wet garden situation. We have an underground spring or whatever. I'll have things grow wonderfully on top until it reaches that wet layer of soil, and the roots say, whoop, whoop, let's go sideways. And they try to hover right there above, and it slows all my production up on top.